its economic record. After it emerged, the UK entered a recession at the end of 2023. Official figures out today show the economy shrank by 0.3% in December, following similar contractions in the previous 3 months. It's the first time the UK's GDP has dropped since the first COVID lockdown. The Chancellor says, though, there is light at the end of the tunnel if the government sticks to its economic plan. Within the last hour, it's been confirmed that 2 boys, both aged 15, have been arrested on suspicion of murdering another boy in Bristol last night. The 16-year-old victim died in what police have described as a sickening stabbing by 2 attackers wearing masks, who then fled the scene on bicycles. It comes just weeks after the deaths of teenagers Mason Rist and Max Dixon, who were also stabbed in Bristol. Police now have enhanced stop and search powers across the city as they continue their investigation. In Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has been accused of being addicted to a culture of cover-up and keeping the public in the dark during her first time as First Minister. She's under pressure to address Holyrood after it was revealed that none of her WhatsApp messages during the pandemic were transferred to the government's official records. Ms Sturgeon has defended deleting the messages, saying it was in line with official advice. Freedom of information requests show other ministers, including Humza Yousaf, also failed to transfer their messages. Opposition leaders are now demanding an urgent explanation, accusing the SNP of a culture of secrecy. Holiday park operator Pontins has had to apologise for engaging in what the European Court of Human Rights described as shocking discrimination towards Irish travellers. It comes after a whistleblower revealed a list of banned Irish surnames labelled as undesirable guests. Pontins staff were instructed to decline bookings based on the names and identify travellers by listening out for Irish accents. The operator's now been served with an unlawful act notice requiring Pontins to engage with the gypsy and traveller community and develop an action plan addressing discrimination. And just lastly, in sport, Crystal Palace manager Roy Hodgson is, we're told, in a stable condition in hospital tonight after falling ill during the team's training session today. The 76-year-old was due to speak at a scheduled news conference for Monday's game against Everton. That has obviously now had to be cancelled. The Premier League club have confirmed he has been undergoing tests in hospital all this afternoon and evening. For the very latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight I'm joined by 2 top-tier and very soberly dressed comedians, Josh Howie and Paul Cox. Well, it's a serious evening, gentlemen.
I'm very stressed. Very stressed.
What, because of the tie?
Well, yes, the tie, but because all the bosses are here.
Yeah, I know.
They're doing this thing from 12 until 6.
Normally, we basically are the caretakers, aren't we?
Yeah. No one pays attention to us. We say whatever we want. It's brilliant.
Midnight, we have a game of table tennis across
the Simon, they're judging us right now. They're watching us. Stop it.
OK, you better crack on. You look entirely plausible, both of you, at the moment. Don't say just like you're like Keir Starmer. You just need to walk in a straight line for the next 20 minutes.
No flip-flopping.
Let's take a look at Friday's front pages. The Daily Mail. Be bold now and go for big tax cuts, Mr. Hunton. They've illustrated that with a robot from Dune. The Guardian have PM warned against cuts as UK falls into recession. I'm not sure what that lady is illustrating. The Telegraph hunt to shelve 2p income tax cut. There is the sexy robot again. Daily Express, now just do it. British Gas told to cut prices after record profit. They won't hear, they don't speak English. The Eye, UK slips into recession, but squeeze will cut inflation, Hunt believes. Interesting woo-woo. And the Metro, male fertility breakthrough, baby boom. Well, that would be good news. Those were your front pages. So let's kick off with the Times, Josh, and mastering your stress levels. What have they got on the front page?
Don't rush to rewrite staff rights, Labour told. So this is the bosses, the big bosses. They fear Labour are going to come in, and they've said, and in the first 100 days, we're going to get some legislation and we're going to help the people of this country in their jobs. And the bosses...
GBNews staff might get a cab allowance.
We're going to get raises, we're going to get beds, we're going to sleep, we don't have to wear ties anymore, it's going to be amazing. And they've shown it to the big wigs, people who own this country.
And we've gone, no.
And, well, they've sort of gone, yeah, that's really good, but please don't cost us any money.
Yeah.
So, as in all of these things, when you rush through legislation, there's going to be unintended consequences. There are things that sound good, and I'm not a massive fan of zero contracts and whatnot, but they still have to fill gaps within the market. And also, for everybody's being squeezed, including companies, and they want to make sure that this isn't going to add a whole load of red tape, which is fair enough.
Yeah, well, that is the tightrope that Labour have been walking since the Blair years, isn't it? Trying to reassure the great unwashed that they haven't been forgotten, while without putting the frighteners on the city.
Yeah, but if they pare back all of their policies, let's not forget that they're supposed to be a socialist, union-based party of the people and the workers. They don't care for big business. That's their position. If they're going to pare back all policies, then what are Labour offering that the Tories don't offer?
The problem that they always have, and I mean, in my lifetime, generally speaking, the default government is the Tories, and then every so often things get so bad that people go, right, let's get in the Labour Party. And so they normally come in when there's a recession or things are awful. Blair was unusual in that respect because things went terribly wrong really early in John Major's administration. Black Wednesday was about 6 months into his reign, if I remember rightly. That decided everything. He never clawed back that loss of credibility. But by the same time Blair's government came in, actually the economy was doing fine. Clark had handled the economy particularly well, and so they had all the money they wanted in order to...
And Gordon Brown did good with it, arguably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Invested it in the NHS, within our schools, within our...
But this is what you need.
systems.
If you want to introduce, like, a left-leaning politics, you know, without being kind of too polemical about Labour, you've got to have some money in the bank to get it started with, haven't you? And this is the problem they have right now.
This is exactly the problem they have, because there's no indication, really, that Rishi Sunak is going to be able to turn around the ship in time.
I don't think so.
So they're going to be dealing with a lot less, and they want to do a lot more.
Now, we'll come on to that very shortly. Do you have anything to say about J-Lo spending $20 million on a film about herself? That's on the front pages of the Times as well.
Oh, really?
Possibly didn't do the research on that one.
Oh, I missed that one. Oh, the top. Well, because she deserves it. If anybody deserves a $20 million film about herself,
absolutely
I would
does.
say J-Lo
Ben Affleck has done a donuts advert about himself, so why shouldn't
get
she?
some money. Yeah, she's had an incredible life.
What have you got? Paul the Telegraph, sexy robot?
Let's talk about Judy for the next 20 minutes.
Just keep saying sexy robot. It's working for me. So but this is all about Farage. So Nigel Farage has warned the incoming chief executive of NatWest that he will try to scupper the sale of taxpayer-owned shares in the bank unless there is a culture change in the wake of the debanking scandal. He's essentially demanding more of a fuller apology.
In the form of money.
In the form of money. He's not entirely happy that he's had the apology or perhaps the cost paid that he was hoping to have paid. So he's warning them he's still there watching like a hawk. And let's face it, he does have the power to create a lot of trouble for whoever comes in. He's proven that. You underestimate him at your peril, I think.
It's a good question whether he has the power to lower share prices. I mean,
I mean, he is saying that because I guess if he causes enough of a kerfuffle, people aren't going to want to touch NatWest. However, when it comes to things like shares, I think you're looking at a much longer-term situation than you are the next year, the next 6 months, whatever.
The big question was, I mean, obviously some people felt they had been morally in deficit and other people felt it wasn't a big deal. But the question is, does it harm their business going forward?
And the other question is, have they changed? And it's right for him to ask that, because it was disgusting what they did, and we want assurances that people aren't going to be debanked in the future.
Well, they deheaded a couple of roses, didn't they? That's all they needed to do.
But there's no actual evidence of them going, you know what, we learnt our lesson. But the big thing is that the government bought those shares. They're now worth half what we bought them for, and now they want to sell them, essentially, to give... So Jeremy Hunt's got a bit of leeway. Well, we're losing out. Hold on to that, and maybe we can make more of our money back.
That would be a good way for Farage to start his campaign to be the next Tory Prime Minister, wouldn't it? Yeah. What did you want to mention, the 4-week wait?
Yeah, so I would like to. I think it's a really important story. I'm sure our watchers and listeners would be interested in too. So patients groups say that family doctors is fast becoming an endangered species as more people are forced to wait at least a month to be seen. So more than 17.6 million, so let's say 18 million appointments took place at least 20 days after being booked. booked, 28 days, sorry, after being booked in England in 2023. And it's important to point out this thing. I think it's better in Scotland.
I mean,
as well.
our GP surgery, I think this is normal now. You ring up on the morning, 8:30, the lines are open. And if you are reasonably patient, you generally get an appointment on that day. But there's a different kind of appointment where you do it online or whatever. And these are the ones how they...
Yeah, you've got these kind of tertiary triaged appointments where you'll speak to someone who's maybe a paramedic or has done a first aid training course or whatever, and they'll diagnose you over the phone and give you some antibiotics.
I've been in there. I don't mind it, but they do look it up. They did Google it the last time I went
of course.
in. They Googled my symptoms, you know.
Which is slightly unnerving, isn't it?
This, I don't know.
At least in the old days, you'd have a big book, dusty, and you think, oh, that seems important.
Like the old stethoscope.
What was it? What was the problem? Swollen wrist?
That's a good question. I can't remember what it was, that one.
Probably best not to share it now, though.
I think it might have been runner's knee. Let's call it runners. Daily Express, very quickly, Josh.
Yes. Now just do it. British Gas told to cut prices after a record profit. Of course, these companies just make more and more money. We pay more and more money towards them.
Things ratchet.
Yeah. So whether, of course, they're going to actually listen and lower their fees for...
Are they still owned by France? It's still French, isn't it, British Gas? I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah. So the government can say what it wants. Whether they actually listen.
Renationalise it.
Sorry, I just think this is a huge scandal.
Yeah.
The wholesale price of gas has plummeted to a recent low. But the price passed on to the customer is at a recent high. There's a massive delta there, and that only goes in one pocket, and that's the supplier's pocket. So, I mean, at a time of cost of living crisis, I think we should be banging the drum a lot louder.
Are you saying that consumers are being ripped off?
Yeah.
I'm going to be the first to say it.
News.
Well, you've got to have a smoothly running free market, haven't you, to some extent? And the fuel industry is obviously, geared up to prevent that happening.
Yes.
You know. There is
such a good point.
So, very quickly, male fertility breakthrough, Paul.
Yeah, so this is all about vibration. Male fertility breakthrough, baby boom. So, blasting sluggish sperm with sound waves can make them move. Now, I would argue, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not sure if you're aware, that blasting anything with vibration could make anything move, irrespective of whether it's dead or not.
Whether it carries on moving after.
It's where it keeps moving. Yeah, exactly.
Is it an alarm clock, or is it just like a dead, like you just kind of...
So the point of these particular sperm is they're a little aged and a little sluggish, not sure what direction they're going in.
Well, no, I'm just going to interrupt you there. I tried to be a sperm donor about 15 years ago. It was over 20 years ago now, and that was the issue with mine. They couldn't use it. I had low motility.
Well, maybe they can now.
In reality, it was very easy to get my wife pregnant, but your sperm in a sperm bank needs to be frozen, and so it needs to have a high motility. But the point is, I was only like 25.
But your children... That was before you had children, wasn't it?
Yeah. I was just going to be a sperm donor.
Basically, I'm going to father the world.
I wanted to write an article about it, and I thought I'd do it. So I got the article into the Independent, but then
you get paid twice, really, don't you?
It's fantastic.
But
anyway,
this is a scary story because I'm going to stop making love whilst music is playing anywhere near my testicles. I don't want to get my wife pregnant again.
You definitely don't want to have one of those big subwoofers.
Like anywhere near,
they're the ones. You can listen to like a bit of piccolo. That is our front pages, all done and dusted. Part 2 has Labour's continuing woes, the economy failing to grow, and immigrants continue to flow. Come back in a couple of minutes. We will explain all of that and more. See you then.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads
weren't... comfortable ride, beautiful engine. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a of time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can turn down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
The growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem. Maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Well, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
Well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, still here with Josh Howie and Paul Cox. So kicking off with the Times now, has Starmer's easy ride to number 10 started to come off the rails, Josh?
Yes, quarter of voters say Keir Starmer has failed on Labour anti-Semitism. This is, of course, we have the Rochelle by-election coming up, and he's dropped them as a candidate after some very
umming and ahhing and
umming and ahhing, some anti-Semitic remarks came out, and it's an issue. He's arguably done a lot to Keir Starmer to change what was a very toxic party under Corbyn. But there is a problem in the left and the far left of anti-Semitism at large. I have this conversation online quite a lot, and I know some people really don't feel he has, and it, you know, isn't rooted out yet. But I think they have changed quite dramatically, haven't they? To be fair. No, I think the shift is massive. Yeah. Arguably, it's not his fault that the left at large, or like I say, the far left, or the signs are changing, aren't they, for what's left and far left, do have a massive anti-Semitism problem. Well, I think, to be fair, this is how I view it. It's an anti-Israel problem, and I know that there are people, and understandably, who think that is a smokescreen for a deeper sentiment. But that, of course, has blown up since Corbyn, hasn't it? It was possible during the Corbyn years Israel was simmering at that time. Now it's such a hot topic we're seeing, worldwide. Real-life anti-Semitic incidents where you have violent incidents against Jewish people in this country go up 96%. That was just real. Against property, 146%. So this idea, it bleeds over into real life. And do you feel? Obviously, that to some extent it's unspoken, but I've spoken about it on this show, that it correlates with the large degree to which Islam is, Islamic is virtually a block vote in some constituencies now. There are large postal votes and so on going on. And there is a concern that this is what is being activated at the moment. When we talk about anti-Semitism, it almost seems to suggest to some people, I think, the far right or suspicion of capitalism, that sort of thing. But this is quite a specific partisan it's a sectarian issue, almost like looking at Northern Ireland or something.
So it's a huge elephant in the room, I think. And in order for that to be true, we'd all have to admit that there is an anti-Semitism problem within the Muslim community. Yeah. And I'm not sure that gets spoken about significantly because of the fallout that would come from that discussion. Yeah. And unfortunately, if you don't have these brazen discussions, you're not going to solve the problem. And if you want to understand whether there's much anti-Semitism out there, tweet about anti-Semitism and you'll soon find out. I would say that if If you'd taken this poll 6 months ago, the likelihood is that a lot of these people might have said that Keir Starmer's doing a good job. Because at that point in time, you know, there'd been a changing of the guards. He'd actively sought to remove any obvious anti-Semitism from the Labour Party. But just in recent times, with everything that's gone on, we've just scratched the surface, maybe lift that drain a little bit, and we can see it still exists because it's inherent within the way the left think, the oppressor versus oppressed.
Well, within the way the left think, and as we say, within the way that rivals for power in the Middle East think. You know, this is not coming.
I will also say that someone this week, a Tory councillor, was suspended for being anti-Semitic as well. So this goes across political spectrums as well.
Yeah.
I'll also say that 59% of people who were questioned said they didn't hear anything about Rochdale and they don't care about it. So even though we're talking about it on a political show, on a news show, I don't believe that the general public, it does make an impact. Anti-Semitism, I don't believe, will play any part in the election. And Jews obviously represent a tiny, tiny portion of this country.
I think that's true. There are bigger issues confronting people at the general election. Anyway, we will be covering the Rochdale by-election immediately after this programme. We are, in the meantime, it says, obliged to list the other candidates. I'm surprised to hear that. Given that I think the election has happened. I'm not going to do that.
You got to do it. Shall we all do it together?
The election is over, but never mind, I'll read them out. As are Ali, Mark Coleman, Simon Danzig, Ian Donaldson, Paul Ellison, George Galloway, Michael Howarth, William Howarth, Guy Otten, Raving Rodents, Bortner, Official Monster Raving Looney, David Tully, and candidate for the Independent.
Well done.
Well done,
Hopefully that's the last time we ever have to do that.
Independent now, Paul, and the UK is in a technical recession. It must be said it doesn't feel a mere technicality at the moment.
No, that's an interesting point. And the technicality refers to the fact that if you have 3 consecutive months of how's your father, then you end up in recession. Jeremy Hunt eyeing cuts to public spending as recession deals a blow to spring budget plans. Jeremy Hunt could slash public spending by billions of pounds to fund pre-election tax cuts in next month's budget. Now, the GDP fell by 0.3% in the fourth quarter, following a decline of 0.1% in the previous 3 months. So according to the Office of National Statistics, we are now in a technical recession. The problem I have with this is, first of all, lies, damn lies and statistics, and that's what the ONS deal in. And I'm losing kind of... That was Twain, I think, who actually said it might be Disraeli. But just because you're on the show, I thought I'd do that, Simon. I wouldn't do that if Lewis was here. He wouldn't understand any of the words. But I'm becoming more and more sceptical about what the ONS say. However, we are in a technical recession, and this does put the Tories in a bit of a bind. I mean, from a comical perspective, if I was in their position, I would make this one hell of a budget and just make all sorts of promises to scupper Labour. But, of course, that's not good government, and they're not comedians. So,
and occasionally, Tories do win power when they don't expect to, such as in 2000.
Well, we have seen... So what we have seen is that Labour are losing some of the traction in the polls.
Yeah.
Now I know it's still down to there's sort of 12% between the two, but you wouldn't have thought that just a couple of months ago. So it's not impossible that, because there has to be quite a large swing in order for Labour to get the considerable swing that they keep telling us they're going to get. It has to be very large.
It may well be decided about which sort of people go out and vote on the day. Of course, that is a tradition.
But it's a shame we're not going to get the budget that we were hoping we were going to get.
What do you think about? How do you feel about recession, Josh?
Well, I mean, look, what you say. I mean, they're dealing with facts as they've come out and statistics. So we are now technically in a recession. That was one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges, was to fix the economy. That's not happening. It's self-evident. Of course, there's going to be a sort of time delay or drag between what we see in these kind of official numbers and life on the street for people, and the impact it's going to make on the day-to-day lives. But really, in terms of making cuts, it's like we've had 13, 14 years now of a Tory government. What more can be cut?
Absolutely, I tend to agree. And also, it has to be said, recession is judged by total GDP, whether it rises or falls. And there's been an enormous amount of mass immigration, which has elevated GDP. GDP per capita may well be a less rosy picture for the Tories than the one that is being used for recession statistics. Times now, Josh. And talking of that immigration, the Channel's small boat migrants might need to be monitored, says Robert Jenrick. I would have thought at least as diligently as, say, a self-service checkout.
Yeah, well, Channel migrants being monitored over extremism fear. So this is Robert Jenrick. He's the former immigration minister. He resigned because he didn't feel that Rishi Sunak was doing enough. He's giving a talk in Washington, and he's sort of comparing the UK situation with the channel, with what's going on with Texas.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is an issue where we have people coming into this country that we don't know who they are, and they are dangerous for this country, arguably, whether it's terrorists, whether it's criminals. And that is part of the danger of illegal immigration, which is what we have to sort out.
I remember Scott Adams, the cartoonist turned political commentator in America, saying that what calculation would you make? He was talking about the southern border there, of course. 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. You know, how many? I think they were saying how many Smarties in the bowl have to be OK, or how many poisoned ones would you accept before you would put that bowl of Smarties into a children's party?
I mean, it is such a good point. And I'll come back to that in a sec. But he's saying that a significant minority have criminal past. Now, I would argue, I know this is quite inflammatory, but I'd argue that all illegal immigration is criminal just by its very definition. So they're all in some way. Now, you can argue there's a humanity to that, which didn't form part of my view then, which needs to be taken into consideration. But the way I would phrase it is exactly what you said there, Simon. You know, how many alkaline attackers do we want to accept? Is it 1? Is it 6? Is it 200? I mean, I would argue that it should be 0. If we've got our own alkaline attackers, then let's deal with that problem, but let's not import the problem.
Well, in 2022, they said it was 19 suspected terrorists who came over. So that is, if you want 19 poison sweets, we got it.
I guess that's it. Still, at least the pensions are getting topped up. Now, before we throw to the break, coming up from midnight tonight through to 6 a.m, GB News is Britain's election channel, and we'll be bringing you live coverage of the by-elections in Wellingborough and Kingswood. Tom Harwood, please tell us more.
Yeah, it's an exciting night for us today, Simon, because this is only the second time in GB News' history that we'll be going past midnight with live TV. The other time, that was when the Queen passed away. This is an exciting moment, the first electoral test of 2024. 2 by-elections in 2 different parts of the country, the Conservatives holding pretty substantial majorities in each. But could Labour do their bit again? Could they overturn some pretty substantial majorities? But it's more than that. It's not just a 2-horse race. There is the confounding factor of Reform UK, the first electoral test at the time that Reform UK is over 10% in the polls. Can they match it? Can they beat it? We'll have all of the results. We'll be live across these 2 constituencies through to 6 a.m.
Thank you very much, Tom. We'll be looking forward to that. And we've seen your huge picnic lined up on the tables outside as well to get you through the night. It looks like it's going to be a great party. That is part 2 done. Coming up, Pontins are hostile to travellers. Judge is pro-Hamas. Israel is back in Eurovision. It's all happening. See you in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
We have let Islamist extremism into Britain, we've let it fester, and now we've let it win. Our absolutely spineless surrender merchant political top brass are rolling over while government ministers wear stab vests and quit their jobs in fear. Veteran Tory Minister Mike Freer has had death threats from Islamists as well as an alleged arson attack on his office. The motive there has still not been established. He's standing down because he doesn't want to die. I cannot emphasise how important this is. A minister of the government is quitting his job because he doesn't want to be killed by a lunatic jihadi. And our Prime Minister has said absolutely nothing. Nothing. A spokesman for Rishi Sunak said he was saddened. Is that it? Our Prime Minister should have been out on the steps of Downing Street saying that we will not be intimidated. We will not let this continue. Enough is enough. What does he do instead? He tweets about XL bullies. Yeah, fantastic. Where's Keir Starmer on this? Well, he's conducting focus groups on how to get the Muslim vote back, so he's hardly going to come out all guns blazing, is he? Ed Davey? Well, there's no way a Liberal Democrat leader would come out and admit that his ideology has helped turn Britain into a poster nation for multicultural failure. The police have let protesters, which include rabid anti-Semites, rampage around London every flipping Saturday for the last 3 months, and today they are finally saying that they don't support some of the protests, which in the past have included a now banned terror group and people holding up anti-Jewish signs. They're saying, please don't march down Whitehall. All right, but will you do anything to stop them if they ignore you? I doubt it. I honestly cannot believe that we have sunk to the level where a serving minister stands down because of threats from extremists and our Prime Minister just doesn't feel the need to address it.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So kicking this section off with the Daily Mail, Paul. First, Jews are chased out of theatres. Now, gypsies are banned from holiday camps.
Yes. So Pontins racially discriminated against Irish travellers who tried to book to stay at its hotels, the Equalities Watchdog has ruled. So this is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Staff were told to decline or cancel bookings made under those names, which included monikers such as Boyle, Doherty and Gallagher. And the company, which was once a bastion of cheap domestic holidays, has now been issued with an unlawful act notice, which is kind of a vague thing, isn't it, really? But that's from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, which all sounds a little bit EU to me.
I've got to say, there's a long list of surnames there as well. I mean, apart from whether or not the intention was wrong, the instrument is rather blunt, isn't it?
Also, yeah, Jimmy Carr wouldn't be able to go. Frankie Boyle wouldn't be able to go.
They're going to be...
They were also listening for accents. I mean, I don't know why I'm coming to their defence, but just for some extra context. I mean, I'm a huge fan of this.
I would like to know quite what they were worried about. There is just being salacious, but you have certain sort of images of
there seems to be some evidence that in the past some large Irish travelling groups have indulged somewhat in drinking and
so just raucous behaviour. They don't come in their large vehicles and just park up.
No. So maybe it's even cheaper to stay at Pontins than it is in your own caravan. Yeah. But I think. Pontins had decided that there was evidence there had been trouble in the past and they wanted to prevent that trouble in the future. However, if they did just go with surnames and Irish accents, then that's probably not cool.
It's the blunt instrument.
But that's how I'd get out of going on holiday to Pontins. My wife was like, I want to go to Pontins. I'd be like, hello, it's Joshua O'Donnell here. Please,
am I the only...
Howie, please.
Am I the only person on this panel that's been on a Pontins holiday, by the way?
No, I've been to an equivalent of Pontins.
But that was some ironic get to meet poor people holiday.
No, it was ironic. It was our holiday.
I've entertained them.
Okay.
As well. I mean, they used to pay quite well.
There's only 3 left now, anyway, and as they're saying, all the places that they all closed down in 2018 and the call centre and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a moot point.
It's on its way out, isn't it? It's going to go all together. It's part of Britannia Hotel.
Well, have you ever stayed at the Adult in Liverpool?
I did, yeah.
Wow,
I stayed in the one in Manchester.
Oh my, that is the worst night of my life. I'm not just talking about my wedding night.
Telegraph now. Maybe justice isn't blind, Josh.
Indeed, judge who failed to jail Hamas paraglider protesters likes post by conspiracy theorist. So, I don't know if you saw when one of the big protests happened and these 3 young women, wore these paragliders, which are how these men came in, the terrorists came in and killed all these people at this music festival. They wore it, they were arrested under terror and actually convicted now, and then they got off, and it turns out the judge who let them off, who just gave them a sort of 12-month conditional discharge or whatever it is, no prison time, even though they could have got 6 months in prison for a terrorist offence. It turns out he'd liked a sort of very dodgy Facebook... Or no, not Facebook.
It was LinkedIn, I think.
Yeah. The fact he's on LinkedIn, I find slightly dodgy anyway. And then he's trying to say, oh, no, I didn't, it was an accident, I liked it, and all of that stuff. But it just shows a level of impartiality. as I've said all along, through these protests, we have the laws in place.
Yeah.
They're not being implemented. And even when they are implemented, they're not being carried through. So there's no deterrent here for young women to celebrate this kind of virulent, evil terrorism and murder of young people. And the other thing that I found incredible was that one of the young women was an asylum seeker from Gaza. And you're like, go back. Go back if you want to celebrate that kind of behaviour.
That's a clip.
I mean, what I'm uneasy about the word likes in headlines. I've got to be honest, or in the news generally. It just feels like playground taunting, doesn't it? You know what I mean? Judge, you liked a post. You liked it, didn't you? You liked that.
He's showing support for...
He does seem to be, but, you know, I go through sometimes. I almost bookmark tweets sometimes. I mean, you have a bookmark now, but do you know what I mean? It's not always... Sometimes it's yeah, you tell them, and sometimes it's like, yeah, that... But if you're a judge, you've got to be held to a higher standard. I do think that as well.
I think against the context of the situation...
If it'd been Gary Lineker liking it...
Oh, then he would have probably got...
I would have kind of gone, he's annoyed.
Yeah, but we have to try, to some degree, in order to tackle these stories, you have to still retain a level of impartiality.
Yeah.
However, the context is that you've got 3 young women wearing the paragliders on their back, just days, by the way, not just... This isn't months later, this is days after the...
Before any retaliatory action.
Yeah, this is days after the 7th of October, and they've been convicted. I mean, conditional discharge sounds like a lewd act, but they have been convicted. So there is an opportunity here. You don't want... I'm not suggesting for a minute that they are even Hamas supporters, although I am just learning that one of them's from Gaza and has recently immigrated. So there is a chance that they are. They could well have voted for them. However, let's just for the argument's sake, let's suggest that they're not Hamas supporters. You still have an obligation in his position to teach a lesson.
Yeah.
Because now... There's nothing stopping any of us walking around with that on our back.
The lesson they've been taught, the communication, is that he secretly agreed with them and he did what he could to prevent them being punished.
And I think that's the problem.
The Guardian now with a story that might help putting migrants off trying to cross the channel, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, this is 2 of the Guardian's favourite words. Ethnic minorities in England have worse access to GPs. So high ethnic minority areas had 37 GPs per 100,000 patients, 15% lower than the 44 GPs per 100,000 patients in low ethnic minority places of England. I mean, it's remarkable, but it's not unsurprising that The Guardian have taken this story and managed to fashion it into a story about minorities, because the more you read about the story, the more you realise that we've just got less GPs and that people in high-density population areas are suffering the most. And, of course, by statistically, that is where the minorities live.
Yes.
So, yes, they are, but not because of the colour of their skin, not because where they came from, and all of these things are what The Guardian are suggesting. Well, we have a GP issue.
It's confounding issues, isn't it? The headline, usually, when you boil it down, life worse for the poor.
Well, this is it. It's conflating ethnic minorities with socio-economic poverty, which is the real issue here.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly frustrating because if we can't deal with what the problem actually is, then we can't solve it.
Yeah, absolutely
I
correct.
agree. I agree.
Well, we're all in agreement on that one, so that's boring. Let's move on. Josh, massive breakthrough in the Middle East crisis. According to The Guardian, Israel can compete in the Eurovision Song Contest after all.
Sure, it's a coincidence I'm getting all these stories. Israel can compete in the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest, say organisers. Yay!
In Malmo in Sweden, which is quite an interesting venue.
Yeah, so the BDS can BDS off. There's boycott diversity.
Is that who was behind the...
Well, yes, they're behind a lot of this stuff. And essentially, what the Eurovision, the European Broadcasting Union have said is that Israel haven't broken any laws. They've been part of the song contest for 50 years, so there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to compete. So they are through to the semi-finals. It'll be interesting to see what pathetic reactions you're going to get from some of the other musicians and bands which you've seen in the past, and they think they're being real rebels, and you're like, guys, you're at the Eurovision Song Contest. You ain't some hardcore rebel rock band.
But they've all been trying to do that lately anyway, haven't they? Not just in terms of politics, but they try and present in, like, leather, and there's, like, loads of kind of posturing as if they're in a death
Didn't
metal.
Israel have the first transgender winner?
Yeah, sings like a bird. That was the...
Sorry, I thought it was a joke, but you're right. Yeah.
No, that was the joke. It was on... I was on The Big Breakfast at the time. had her on as a guest. Sings like a bird. But I noticed the Israeli contestant this time is called Eden Golan, which is like a fantastically sort of enriched name, isn't it?
Doesn't get more Jewish than that.
No, it doesn't, does it? Even from the Golan Heights, fantastic. Anyway, we wish everyone well. Their semi-final is on my birthday, so that's that sorted. Paul, thin ice for you to skate on here. Should schoolgirls still be wearing sexy skirts?
Yeah.
Is there a blanket option? Does it depend on the girl?
Well, I'm going to tackle this with the professionalism I'm employed to use. Gendered uniforms divide the sexes and put young people off physical activity. So girls might feel less confident about doing things like cartwheels and tumbles in the playground or riding on a bike on a windy day if they're all... Sorry, I can't read that and not laugh, can I? If they are wearing a skirt or a dress. And there are two elements to this story. One element is that, of course, gendered clothing for girls and women, it does create uncomfortable situations for them. Yeah. And this is kind of an op-ed, this piece, and she's saying from her own experience that is exactly what happened. She lists a whole bunch of ghastly experiences she had. The second part of this is that teenage boys are a bit disgusting, and I'm not sure how you overcome both. Now, my daughter's a teenage girl, and she tends to wear trousers to school. Yeah. The writer of this suggests that when she was at school, which was between 2012 and 17, she couldn't wear trousers to school, so that wouldn't solve the problem.
I will say, though, I have my teenage daughter is now 19 and was never particularly, one way or the other on this issue, but she certainly had friends, and I drive around Brighton and Hove. There are some teenage girls who quite like looking a bit sexy, looking a bit provocative, and it is a fairly well-established trope that there are dads who go, "You're not going out dressed like that," and the teenage girl tells him that they are. So there's this kind of slightly disingenuous presumption or projection that from this particular correspondent, who I'm sure is being sincere about her own experience, that teenage girls are being forced to expose their legs, and some of them are horrified by it, but others, I think, kind of quite enjoy.
I think it's about having the choice. Yeah. I think some young women, as this writer is, and speaking to other young women, have been very traumatised by the sort of early sexualisation. Yeah. And as you say, I think a big issue is teenage boys being stupid. I know that I was an idiot. Yeah. I regret things that I said.
Do you think co-educational schools were a mistake? I mean, I do.
Yeah.
Did you go to I went to a co-education school.
I didn't. I went to a single-sex comprehensive, which is unusual. It had been a grammar school to the year before. And it remained single-sex all the way through. I know some have sort of co-ed sixth form. There were one or two boys who came to the sixth form who'd been in co-ed schools and said we were all emotionally repressed and stuff. But to be honest, I don't remember feeling any kind of...
I actually agree with you. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think it was probably better that I didn't go until the sixth form, and then it became girls.
Yeah.
And
it's human nature versus progression again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's part two done. Coming up, students have stopped drinking. Maybe they need to have a look at Cairns train line rebrands. That'll get them going again. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
What you've got to do is, it's a collective. You've got to look like a meteorologist. Nobody out there is necessarily going to be a meteorologist, but what I do on a daily basis is I look globally. I look at what we've got in terms of the track of weather that we've had in the UK. So if you go back a couple of years and we go back to the heat wave of July, August 2022, 40.3 degrees, there's a dot in the landscape, and before then there was other incidents going on. Now that was a huge dot because that was extreme temperatures, and then we, since then, last summer, although we didn't get that kind of record, we saw months with records, various months, May and June and September and October, all-time records. So another dot, and then you're looking again globally. What's going on globally? What's going on in China, in USA, in Africa, now in Australia, for example? Records falling like ninepins. So when these storms come along, you've got to say, OK, would they have happened anyway? The answer is probably yes. They probably would have done. But when you start getting where we're up to with Jocelyn is number 10, then that's not the record. The record is 11. named storms, 2015-16. So we've been there before, but only a few years ago. So these things are starting to mount up. And do you know what? On the can of climate change, climatologists, better people than me, people who study this expertly, and they look at it and they say, OK, what we're going to get with extra dimension of heat in the atmosphere, which energy and heat that basically means that you've got more intense storms potentially that can carry more water. What do you get? You get higher wind velocities and you get more water and or snow. We've just gone through a period where parts of this country have been deluged and flooded for the first time.
Yes. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners for our final section. Josh, the sorry state of our students is having a knock-on effect on our economy. Could be responsible for the recession, in fact.
Yeah, clean living students blamed for nightclub closures. And this is from Peter Marks. He's the chairman of Recom UK, not to do with Reform. They own a bunch of nightclubs, including Prism. And, yeah, there's a real issue. We've got 1 in 5 young adults don't drink anymore.
Prism?
Prism, yeah, do you remember Prism?
Yeah. We've got one of them.
You got
You do,
I've been there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, us three were there just recently, weren't we?
I don't remember. That's how good a night it was.
Anyway, but that is full of students.
Yeah,
right?
full of students. But he said that he was in Leeds and it was middle of the week. So students aren't drinking in the middle of the week because I guess they're paying so much money now. They're going to be paying for their whole life. They think, you know what, I might as well actually study my degree.
First of all, they're broke, and secondly, absolutely, they can't just afford
get their
to
money's
treat
worth.
it as a couple of years of faffing about.
Which is what I did.
Is it possible? Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. Although the north, the northeast, the northwest, there's a pretty healthy drinking culture generally, isn't it? It's not necessarily dependent.
Well, he says
a lot of these are closures in the south, right. Or Leeds and down here. I wouldn't call the Leeds south, which are all Nottingham or Birmingham to me. Everything above London's north to me. There is one of these closing in Portsmouth as well, which is my local city.
Gap is the traditional.
It is actually, isn't it? Which is nowhere near Watford, weirdly.
No.
There's one of these closing in Portsmouth, which is my local city, or the city most local to me. And I was discussing this with my friendship group, or mum and dad as I call them, and we were trying to discuss, you know, what is it that's causing this? And the people are drinking. I think the way that people socialise has changed a great deal as well. We didn't have much else to do.
Things always change. I mean, we had what we thought was a fairly stable drinking culture, but that was very different from the couple of generations prior to that as well. You know, the working men's clubs had gone already, things like that. Things change.
Things change. There we go.
Tinder news now in the Telegraph, Paul, and to no one's great surprise, the app is intended to get you addicted to the app, not to find love.
Yeah, funnily enough, Tinder sued for turning users into addicts. So the owner of Tinder has been accused of addicting users to endless scrolling on apps rather than helping them find true love. And Tinder, I didn't realise this, is owned by Match of Match.com and also owns Hinge. I said Hinge, Josh.
Right.
And the complaints
but not bracket.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The plaintiffs have accused Match of destroying millennial traditional courtship or for the millennials. So let's just park that for a sec. I totally agree with you. The apps are designed to be addictive, and you cannot blame them for that. But the accusation is that it's destroying the traditional courtship method. Now, I don't believe that because it's still an option that's available to everybody.
Yeah.
Of course, you can argue that most people are on the apps, but those people exist. And if you went out, I mean, you can't go to a nightclub anymore, but if you went out and about...
There are hard copies of these people in venues.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Now, I'm not sure that the choice has been taken away. Of course, it's different. Yeah. Maybe it was harder in our day. I never used apps. I was married before apps.
Can I ask you
existed.
that? And I'll ask you both of you. Well, I sort of switch to Josh. I find sometimes, and this might be a terrible confession, but I sometimes find if I've spent an hour or two on Twitter pursuing several conversations at once and scrolling on all the rest, and then I encounter a real-life flesh-and-blood person and have a conversation with them, it feels a bit slow.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You kind of go, come on.
And certainly when you're dealing with your kids. I mean, it's half-term this week, so I'm arguing on Facebook and Twitter simultaneously with about 20 different people, like... And then my kids will try and say something to me, just hurry up.
But in terms of sexual appeal, I can imagine that same thing happens. You know, I've never used Tinder. I've never used the Grindr is the gay one,
The
right?
gay one, yeah.
And Tinder is exactly the same.
Yeah.
But
Simon, Grindr's the gay one. Yeah.
Whatever. I've never used that. I certainly don't have a burner phone specifically for it. But this whole kind of thing, if it's like being on Twitter, if it is that same thing where you're kind of like, oh, maybe that, maybe I'm being funny there, I'm being funny there, and then you just meet a person, that's like a bit of a sort of lead weight.
Ultimately, you still have to meet that person. People like us that maybe write for a living or are used to playing with words, we could probably attract someone a little bit easier.
Going to get one last story in, Josh. That is the story about the most traffic on Twitter today. Sadiq Khan's monstrous rebranding of the capital train lines to suit his woke agenda.
Oh, my God, this is painful. All aboard the £6 million suffragette line. So the Sadiq Khan's TfL paid agency £115,000 to explore decolonisation and queer histories. When we are paying a huge amount of money for those of us who live in London for public transport, and when it's even they're getting government money as well, because supposedly they have to fill some financial black hole, and then you find out about this utter waste of our resources.
And even to say waste is generous, to be honest, because it's actively annoyed.
It's a vanity project, isn't it? It's a vanity project.
Said, I'm sure this is going to annoy a bunch of people.
Yeah.
It's just unnecessary at a time when people are struggling.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's a vanity project. It's what happens when you believe you're untouchable. I think Sadiq Khan thinks he's untouchable.
And I don't think he's going to.
And by the way, no one calls the Overground anything other than the Overground.
No, exactly. You just going to Wembley or whatever, don't you? It's ridiculous. But it has made an awful lot of people go, oh, why are you old people always culture war, making a culture war issue? It's like, it's always a culture war when we go, what are you doing? Stop doing that.
Also,
it's never a culture war when they spend 120 grand doing it.
They call one of the things the suffragettes as opposed to the suffragists, which is a big issue.
That's another massive issue.
Matter,
Well, that's for another time. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages. Daily Mail, now be bold and go for big tax cuts, Mr Hunt. Guardian, PM warned against cuts as UK falls into recession. Telegraph, Hunt to shelve 2p income tax cut. Daily Express, now just do it. British Gas told to cut prices after record profit. The Eye, UK slips into recession, but squeeze will cut inflation, Hunt believes. And the Metro, male fertility breakthrough baby boom. It's all about the vibrations. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Paul Cox. We're back at the same time tomorrow. Coming up at midnight, however, through to 6 a.m, GB News, Britain's election channel, will bring you live coverage of the by-elections in Wellingborough and Kingswood. I like Wellingborough, very nice gig. I wish them well. Tom Harwood, please tell us more.
Oh, these are fascinating seats, Simon. This is going to be a big, big night. We've got 2 seats in 2 different parts of the country with different dynamics within their populations, which will tell us some pretty key ideas about how the next general election will go. These are the first electoral events of this year, and this is an election year. Could these 2 blue seats go red? Or could the confounding factor of the Reform Party throw up a surprise? We will learn so much throughout the night. We've got reporters on the ground in each constituency and an amazing array of big-name guests right through with you to 6 a.m. This is Britain's election channel. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Friday's going to be a much